It's a great video, great insight, right? One of the things I was thinking about is going back to like the history of even you getting to know who Vicente Zambada was, right?
Hmm.
Over the years you got to hear more about him, but and I say this to a lot of the even journalists I speak to, that I feel like our cooperation, our biggest, I guess, the biggest reward that the government got was that we cooperated against Vicente. We were the only ones that ever have him on a recording, making deals, have him on several recordings, and he was often overlooked. But in the cartel, everyone knew he was a big target, like you said, because first of all, he was the closest thing to El Mayo, and because they knew that he was the one that would carry the throne after that, take over the throne, and that's why they targeted him. He's very different from all the narco juniors in a way to kind of say that he's not a junior. He's nothing like them. I'll tell you, if Vicente was in Mexico with this whole Chapo war, there wouldn't be no more Chapos. That's the compliment I give him, just because he knows the art of war. He learned it from his dad. He would have had all the governments, the CIA working for him by now. There's a few things from his book that he said. I think it was 22 when he ordered his first killing, but I think it was more like he was 17. I think the first killing was, I think he ordered some state police from Tijuana or something, from Baja California. They're in the way, and he ordered them to kill him. And let's not forget, he's the one that invented the anthrax. There's no Chino anthrax and all the people that came after him without him. Think about that. I heard it over the years, right? Me and my brother were on the other side of the one when everything was happening in terms of cooperation. So there's a lot of things that I will know that I'm not gonna, we'll discuss later. But he was going to meet the DA just like Chapo and other associates met with the DA prior. The only thing that had changed was that he was already indicted. Like literally, when they went to sit down with him, he was already indicted out of Chicago. And from what I know is that the government wanted to see up to what extent would he cooperate. What was he willing to give them? What was on the table for them? And he went in there thinking that it was going to be a negotiation. From my understanding, that he did have some type of guarantee that he could go to a meeting, right, and sit down with them, and that he was going to be okay. So it's the reason why they made sure they had all the intelligence to basically follow him back. I think they used like some top-notch security satellite to follow him back to the stash house, and that's why they arrested him there. If that makes any sense, where the DA kept their part of the agreement, but he was still arrested.
He walked in there a fugitive. They let him walk out the door, kept tabs on him, grabbed him. The deal's still on the table, but we're not gonna wait for you to come walking through our doors.
Yeah, and one of the reasons being was because the DA that was sitting down with him was a different office, which was the San Diego office. It was the San Diego prosecutor's office with the agents from DEA from San Diego, and that was actually an issue too as well, right? Shai, you've seen him, enough of this, enough of this, that if he was gonna be turning himself in, he would have done what me and my brother did, right? You go give yourself to the government, and you're in the United States the next day, just like Mini Leak did, just like his brother Serafin, Vicente's brother Serafin did. Mayito Gordo, which was the one that was supposed to take the throne after him, he was arrested and then he was extradited. He was somebody we cooperated against as well. We indicted both Maito Gordo, Maito Flaco based on our cooperation, but he cooperated as well. He's free, but it just kind of goes to the level of knowledge, right? That Vicente knew and Maito Gordo didn't. Just different levels, right? It's hard. I don't think there's any comparison between you and any Ivan or Alfredo or any of the sons that would compare to him. He was just different. I've seen that some of the comments, like even for people who think that he was more respected than Mayo, no, not at all. He was respected the same, right? Like in one, they're like one, but because he was a little bit more modern, and I think I told you, like there's this story of one of Mayo's really big, like he was a friend of him, a really good friend, and he was a big buyer of he'd buy tons of coke from El Mayo, right? I think it was Julio Beltran, and from my understanding, there's a story where Julio Beltran had tied some people up because they owed him money, and when Vicente found out, he called them and said, "Hey, oh, you have these people tied up or whatever, or this individual tied up." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, let him go. He's my guy. Let him go." And he's like, "No, well, I need my money." He's like, "No, you let him go, and then we'll work it out." He's like, "Nah, let me touch your dad." And he was like, "Okay." Called him back, said, "Yeah, my dad said come talk to him." And when he showed up at the ranch wherever he showed him up, he had him and all his armed men killed. And the story goes was that when his father asked him, or maybe his father approved, but the story goes that when his father asked him, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Because if they don't respect me while you're here, they're not going to respect me when you're not." I will tell you, look, Shai. gangs wasn't for me. Me being a part of something, I was never the type of person. But I've also told you that at times that even though I felt like I didn't let the power get to me, it did feel good to be like members only. You know what I'm saying, Shy?
Right, right. I'm so and so's people.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you something. Like it was different. Like there's so many stories I could tell you, but when I said you, like I'm Vicente's people or whatever, people would look at me, and there's a difference where I could just get on a phone call and call them, be like, "Wait, you know this dude?" It was different, and I remember even Tommy used to look at me, and he's like, "And mine wasn't easy to get a hold of. You make an appointment, you make a couple calls, but he said, "Did you having Vicente on the direct line is like you being able to call the president." He used to get excited, Shy, and now, that irony of him comparing Vicente Sambala to the president of Mexico kind of makes sense, right? Now that we hear everything from his own mouth. He was a quiet person, a quiet individual. He was more like, one of those person who was a thinker, easygoing. But I also saw the other side of him. I saw the hate. And those are going to be stories that we have to share and a little bit later on as you start covering some of the other people. But I will tell you, he was one of the persons that I think made me helped me and my brother see that world for what it was. And I sat in some, meetings with some him and real big important people, right? And I got to see and hear, you know what I mean? The dirtiness, or how about this? And I have to tell you, not only that, I'm gonna call it because even for me at that time was childish. I remember be sitting there just like hearing one story, like there's a certain individual. I'm not gonna give him away, but he had his group of friends. There was some famous dudes, and we were all there. And I knew that dude was gonna become more famous later on. He wasn't as famous when I was there, right? One of his guys, and he's telling them that they were at a narco event, right? It was a party or whatever, and they had different groups, and he's giving the rundown of the groups that were there, the musical groups, and Vicente's like, "Was this narco there?" "Yeah." "Oh yeah, there he was there with his guys." Like, "Yeah." "How many guys did he have with him?" He's like, "I don't know, 2 3 dozens." "Oh yeah." And he's like, "Yeah." "And what were they wearing?" "Well, they were all in black." "How was their gear?" "They were all in black, and they looked like they all had, brand new equipment." And I'm listening to them, Shy, right? And when he said it, he kind of said it like, "Who the fuck cares?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Vicente was like, "Oh, you sucking his dick?" Like it turned it on him. Like, in Spanish, like, "Ah, le estoy mandando la verga. Ah, tenía equipo, ¿verdad?" Estaban en negros y equipados con, like just started just roasting about hard, bro. Like not even, it went from being friendly to next thing you know, he's mad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like some Joe Pesci, like, "You think I'm funny?"
yeah,
That
yeah,
type
yeah.
of shit. And at first I have a grin on me that kind of laughing, and at the same time I'm thinking like, nah, bro, this is not what big cartel dudes do. And then next thing you know, it turned into like, what? You were rubbing his balls? He's like, "Nah, you just asked me. I'm just answering you. And it was just like awkward, bro, because this grown man.
But one grown man got his hands tied. Meanwhile, the other grown man got carte blanche on whatever violence
Yeah,
he want
nah,
to
nah.
play.
The other man has his hands tied and his feet tied.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so,
So
it's
he
like
can't
it's
sit
one
there and
of.
tell him like, "Papa, you done switched this thing gone to fighting words at this point. Now you
Oh
testing my
man,
manhood."
I do believe in keeping his stature like who he was important, like relevant enough, like for people could see. But at the same time, I want to point out what made me and my brother start to think like, damn, we're only gonna be pretty for, like, how it is. Like you get old, right? You become less attractive. You got to be, jumping over hoops. But one of the things that I do remember, we were sitting there one time, the radios went off, and they shouted some numbers out and whatever. They started talking, and he says, "Who's the one in the Lamborghini?" And he says, "It's whatever, whatever, whatever." He like, wasn't he buying from him? Let's see, call, right? He was buying from so and so, one of their guys, and they called and he said, "Hey, I'm right here." They're like, "We want to know, is this person still buying from you?" "Yeah, not as much anymore. He comes only shops once in a while." I remember Vicente's like, "Oh, what did he say?" "Oh yeah, he shops once in a while." "Oh, so he thinks that it's up to him." He said, "Kill him."
That's it.
Meaning he didn't like that he was in a Lamborghini. And I remember, like, "You for real?" He told him, like, "You for real?" Like, he's like, "Yeah, fuck him." And in I mean, I don't recall every word for word, but I remember thinking, damn, you, Vicente Zambada, who fucking cares about who's driving a Lamborghini, right?
You can't give a lame power, dog. A person who has that type of insecurity inside of them is always gonna have it, no matter what you give them.
You give your analysis because you're good at this. I don't think he's one of those persons. I think that he's everything, but he was in his mind what his father was. It's gonna be me. It's gonna be us or no one. Period. That's it. And he doesn't say that part in the book. You don't hear those stories. I don't think he was a lame. I think he understood his power. I think he understood he wasn't like Chapo's sons or his younger brothers or the Chino Anta. He was just a different type of man, but at the same time, he was also that person that was like F him.
He's them, but smarter.
Yes, exactly. Them, but smarter. Exactly.
That does not mean that he don't have that lame ass sucker jealousy, envy,
Absolutely.
insecurity.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That lack of confidence that lives deep down inside that they show when they do shit like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I respected them as older men, right? I looked at them like my just say, at the age of my where my dad where it's like you can't even call them as haters, like all these haters. Like it's weird because maybe it's just the brainwash I have, but he was them just more modern. And when people say he didn't like corridos, no, he liked corridos. He just was more where he liked a certain type of music. That was the music he was into, and maybe he didn't like a corrido, but he didn't worship him. He was gonna, not gonna be like Mini Leak and all these dudes that become famous because they have songs made out of them. But remember, like even my own trouble, like they didn't care about. They listened to him, but they didn't care about them.
He didn't outwardly want the clout, but inwardly he did.
Yeah, bro. At the end of the day, all we had to say El Nino, right?
He not gonna tell everybody he mad about your Lamborghini, but he gonna be mad about your Lamborghini.
Yeah, and it's the pub culture group where people think the narco corridos were famous. Like, oh, you don't have a narco corrido, twins, you were in shit. And then you're gonna hear someone say, "Oh, I had six bodyguards," And I will tell you something. Now that you had some insight, if anyone would ever question, me and my brothers where we were in that world, there's your answer. You get me? And I do feel like remember he was you could imagine how upset he was because we're the ones that told on him. Shy, he ended up in Chicago because of us. But we also now, gave him the benefit of a new life, right?
Well, let me ask you. This is something that I've been thinking about. Is he of the character that you would ever think, by any stretch of the imagination, we've seen things happen that we never imagined would happen? Do you think he missed the game, and that's something that he would risk it all again for?
And now this part, because I do know him, knew him, his wife, his family, absolutely not. On a more internal level, him losing his son, he's all about his family. It might drive him insane, but it's when you know that you make a promise or
I take the
when you have a
pass.
second chance. Yeah, yeah, he could have that. Now, does it kill him? Does he think about it? Absolutely, you get me? But the man that he is, the other man, the other side of him, the family man, all that, no, absolutely not.
What happens when that ego pops up on him in a regular place somewhere in his regular life?
Yeah, remember, these are people that for him, he could be a regular person because in the back of my mind, he knows. We're talking about one of the richest men, probably, in the cartel world that walks around, somewhere in the United States like he's a regular person, probably doing Ubering or something. Who knows? Think about that. Just wanted to give you some context on there. But great job. You did great job. Hopefully, the whole, the narco culture listens to this and so they could see the way it was. Who better than the heir to the cartel himself. He's basically the Simba, right? Remember, his nickname is El Nino. Multiple corridos of him, like he is the rightful heir of the Sinaloa cartel. And you see all the stuff that they were into.
Here's another thing. That time in prison and age can do something to that ego and make you realize that you had it and make you realize you don't need it.
Yeah, you know what? I think that too. Like even when he went to testify against Chapo, like he didn't go in there, I don't think, ashamed. He went in there saying, "You gave me permission. That's my friend."
Right. That's my
You
friend.
know?